Hi, this is Margaret Maloney, and welcome to the Death Dhamma podcast. Together we will consider life, death, and impermanence. Because in between birth and death, we lose things. Not just our glasses and our keys. We lose identities, relationships, ideas, and more. But what we can gain right now is facing this together, and we will gain freedom, peace, and progress on our path. Hi, everyone, and welcome to a in-between season special bonus episode of the Death Dhamma podcast. I am so glad you are here, and it's kind of like a preview to season 3. So let's think of our time together. In season 1, we went all in with speaking to 12 wise teachers about their experience of death and loss, and what they learned, and how they managed dealing with death and loss and grief. And in season 2, we asked people to discuss impermanence and stories of impermanence. And in season 3, our theme is going to be attachment. We know that part of our suffering comes from attachment. And that's what we're going to explore. And as a precursor to that, or a preview, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to share with you now a sutta from the Pali Canon, from the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's called the Gandhabhaka or Bhadraka Sutta. The Sutta to Gandhabhaka or Bhadraka, because Gandhabhaka goes by 2 names, or is known sometimes by 2 names, Gandhabhaka or Bhadraka. On one occasion, the Blessed One was staying among the Malans in a Malan town named Urvalakappa. Then Gandhabhaka, the headman, went to the Blessed One, and on arrival, having bowed down to him, sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to the Blessed One, "It would be good, Lord, if the Blessed One would teach me the origination and ending of stress." And Buddha said to him, or the Buddha said to him, "Headman, if I were to teach you the origination and ending of stress with reference to the past, saying, 'Thus it was in the past,' you would be doubtful and perplexed. If I were to teach you the origination and ending of stress with a reference to the future, saying, 'Thus it will be in the future,' you would be doubtful and perplexed. So instead, I, sitting right here, will teach you right there the origination and ending of stress. Listen and pay close attention, I will speak." "As you say, Lord," Gandhabhaka, the headman, replied. And the Blessed One said, "Now what do you think, headman? Are there any people in Urvalakappa who, if they were murdered or imprisoned or fined or censured, would cause sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, or despair to arise in you?" "Yes, Lord, there are people in Urvalakappa who, if they were murdered or imprisoned, or fined, or censured, would cause sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, or despair to arise in me. And are there any people in Urvalakappa who, if they were murdered or imprisoned, or fined, or censured, would cause no sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, or despair to arise in you?" "Yes, Lord, there are people in Urvalakappa who, if they were murdered or imprisoned or fined or censured, would cause no sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, or despair to arise in me. Now, what is the cause? What is the reason why the murder, imprisonment, fining, or censure of some of the people would cause you sorrow, whereas the murder, etc., imprisonment, fining, and censure would cause you no sorrow?" "Those people in Urvalakappa whose murder, imprisonment, fining, or censure would cause me sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, etc., are those for whom I feel desire and passion. Those people whose murder, etc., would cause me no sorrow are those for whom I feel no desire or passion. Now, headman, from what you have realized, fathomed, attained right now in the present, without regard to time, you may draw an inference with regard to the past and future. Whatever stress in arising arose for me in the past, all of it had desire as its root, had desire as its cause. For desire is the cause of stress. And whatever stress in arising will arise for me in the future, all of it will have desire as the root, will have desire as its cause. For desire is the cause of stress. And the headman replies, Amazing, Lord, stupendous, how well the Blessed One has put it. Whatever stress in arising arose for me in the past, all of it had desire as its root, had desire as its cause. For desire is the cause of stress. And whatever stress in arising will arise for me in the future, all of it will have desire as the root. And then he, repeats kind of the same thing. Well, have desire as its cause, for desire is the cause of stress. And then he goes on. And so now I'm just going to pause for a second and just kind of recap. So if you haven't delved into the teachings in the Pali Canon, a couple of things. They are generally repetitive, as you're hearing me repeating sentences with just a couple of words changes. Somebody asks the Buddha the question, the Buddha restates the question, then the Buddha answers the question, restates the answer maybe in a couple of different ways, or expounds on it in a couple of different ways, and then the recipient, the person listening, restates the question and the answer in a couple of different ways. And that's not because anyone thought we were idiots. It is because we are talking about an oral tradition. Yes, I am reading it today because eventually it was written down. But at the time, the teachings were oral. And so, repetitiveness helps to remember something. And yeah, sure, it helps with our learning, right? So I think we're really getting the point. Desire is the cause of stress. Stress being sometimes another interpretation or translation of dukkha. Some people say suffering. Some people say stress or distress. And this last season, in season 2, we talked about impermanence. And so now this desire or this, it's leading us to this dukkha. The desire, we could also call it attachment or craving. We want things to be a certain way, or we don't want things to be another way. And this brings us to this stress. The sutta continues, and Gandhabhaka continues and explains that he has a son. I have a son named Saravasi who lives far away from here. When I get up in the morning, I send a man saying, Go, learn how Saravasi is doing. And as long as that man has not returned, I'm simply beside myself thinking, don't let Saravasi be sick. And so the Buddha says to him, Now, headman, what do you think? If Saravasi were to be murdered or imprisoned or fined or censured, would you feel sorrow? And then, the whole thing, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair. Lord, if my son Saravasi were to be murdered or imprisoned, my very life would be altered. So how could I not feel sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair? Thus, headman, by this line of reasoning, it may be realized how stress, when arises, all of it has desire as its root, has desire as its cause, for desire is the cause of stress. And then they go on and continue to talk about the mother, Saravasi's mother, the headman's wife, and his, feelings for her, and the same thing, that if something were to happen to her, how he would feel sorrow and pain and distress. And then it ends again, the Buddha saying, by this line of reasoning, it may be realized how stress, when arises, all of it has desire as its root, has desire as its cause, for desire is the cause of stress. And if you wonder, and I think after this you don't, but let me make it, to just be super. And this is why we on the Death Dhamma podcast are going to talk about attachment, because when the people we love are ill or are absent from us, or in what we consider might be the final absence, when they die, of course we have sorrow, and the root of our sorrow is our attachment for them. And when I bring that to you and I say that, it's not a judgment, it's an observation of fact. This isn't to say we should never love. We want to be aware that in our relationships and our love of other human beings, there can be an element of attachment, and that element of attachment contributes, of course, to our grief and to our loss. And that is why we are now in season 3, upcoming the end of January, going to explore stories and examples of attachment. And if you would like to share your story, if you would like to submit something, a story, an experience you've had with attachment and what it has done in your life and the results that you've seen from attachment, I hope that you will contact me with that story. I would love that way. You could either come be a guest or you could send me the story and I would include it as part of an episode in a discussion. And to do that right now, all you need to do is send me a note at margaret@margaretmaloney.com, which is MargaretMeloni. Thanks for being here. Looking forward to spending time with you in season 3. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.